Wilhelm Steinitz, the first world chess champion, always said one thing. You don't attack the king just because, but first you must destroy his position. In today's example, I'm going to show you how to do it so you can apply it in your games, especially by understanding well what I'm explaining to you. In this game by Steinitz from over 150 years ago, we'll understand it perfectly. The first world champion started with the king's pawn to e4, and they responded with g6. We already have a first clue. Normally, our opponent will develop the bishop to g7 via fianchetto, then probably develop this knight and castle. Well, I'm also going to show you some tips that will allow you to attack this type of structure. You'll see that this video is extremely thorough, and if you're understanding it well, you'll get some good results to use in your games, as long as they don't take the center in the first moves. For example, here a common response would be f5, right? The double king's pawn, d5, even c5, Sicilian defense. All of these would occupy the center. A move like g6 doesn't do that. What we have to do is, obviously, occupy the center with our two pawns. This is of vital importance, okay? Why? Because the player who has control of the center is the player who has control of the position. I always use this example with my students, but it represents it perfectly. Imagine that the chessboard is a mountain seen from above, okay? Where the four central squares are the center of the mountain. I don't know if you're following me. The one who dominates the top of the mountain dominates all the sides. Very well, the game continues with bishop to g7. They start to threaten the center from a distance, and although it's still very well defended, for white, Steinitz tries to defend it with a fairly solid pawn structure. In this way, he ensures he has an extremely strong center. Black continues with the double fianchetto. First they wanted to do it on this side, and now they're going to do it on this other side. Look at what they want to do. They want to develop their bishop to b7, and now they would be seriously threatening one of our central pawns. This pawn wasn't being attacked very strongly because the queen defends it, even the pawn too. But as soon as they play bishop to b7, we'll have a serious threat. So we must think prophylactically, that is, before the opponent moves, how we're going to defend it, right? So that it doesn't become a problem later. If you keep thinking about moves like this, you'll see that your games will turn out much better. We can do it with two logical moves. c3, I wouldn't consider it. Why? Because we'd be weakening our structure too much, and our king wouldn't be safe on either flank. See? We've weakened the queen side, but that's okay. We could castle short, or we'll see, maybe even long. But we wouldn't have such a defined structure as with the two pawns advanced, let's say, okay? Try not to move so many pawns. So I do it either with the bishop, right? All right, also defend it with the knight from d2. But which one are we going to move? Which one do we decide on? Well, here's a little trick, okay? When you're undecided about which piece to put on defense, let's see which positions each of these two pieces could go to. The bishop has one square available, 2, 3, even 4 squares. The knight simply has 2, d2 and a 3, but I'd almost rule out a 3 because it would be too far from the game. Therefore, it practically only has one possible square. That's why, since this knight is almost certainly going to d2, what I do is take the chance to defend the e4 pawn with the knight. However, what's the problem with that? That now we wouldn't be able to develop the bishop. Of course, this is what Steinitz got. Pay attention, okay? He wants to come and attack my pawn, so he says, first I move the bishop, and when he attacks it, I move the knight to defend. And problem solved. And that's how it happened in the game. Did you understand this concept? It can be very helpful for you to take advantage and develop your pieces in a super correct way. Very well. Black plays d6 to be able to develop their knight, to be able to go fight for the center, which they haven't done yet, right? And here the player with the white pieces, the world champion Wilhelm Steinitz, develops his knight to f3. Maybe another way to take advantage of black not fighting for the center would have been to add more fuel to the fire with the f-pawn. This has pros and cons. The pro is that we're occupying the center in an extremely strong way. The con is that we're weakening ourselves a lot and they could come and attack us. And although it wouldn't be serious, honestly, it would be much easier for black to attack now than with the pawn on f2. It makes sense, right? Both moves are correct. Knight f3 and e5, a key moment in the game. We must decide whether to stay still, right? Because there's a tension here. What does a tension mean? That two pawns are threatening each other. This is a tension in chess. They could capture us, we could capture them, we could stay still, we could advance. What do we have to do? Well then, let's think about it clearly. It's simple. If we capture, they're going to recapture with the pawn because they won't do it with the bishop since they lose it, right? This bishop is extremely good and we could capture it with the knight. Therefore, it's almost certain that if we capture, we already know they'd recapture with the pawn and the position would look like this. If we advance, we have pros and cons again. Look, we have something very good, and that's that we're trapping this bishop, right? But by defining the pawn structure, right? Why is the pawn structure defined? Because there are no possible exchanges for now. Black has a very strong counterplay, and that's attacking the base of the pawn chain. If you've seen the academy classes, you'll understand it perfectly. The base is this d4 pawn. Therefore, a counterplay with f5 would give a comfortable counterplay to the black pieces, and we wouldn't want that, right? It might seem like the move d5 is positive for us because we're gaining space and trapping the bishop, but we'd be giving up a strong counterplay on the king side from the black pieces. But there's a move we really like, which is precisely to capture this pawn, and I'm going to explain why. Which piece do we still need to develop? The bishop, right? Where we want to take it? Well, we have several possible options. Normally we want to take it to c4, which is usually one of the best positions. And do you know why? Because it's threatening the weakest point of the position. And it's the weakest point of the position precisely because it's the only point on the entire board that's only defended by the king. That's why it's such a weak point. But of course, if we play bishop c4, they'll simply play e6, and this bishop won't do anything anymore. They can even stop it completely, right? That's why now that they've played e5, it makes a lot of sense to place the bishop on c4, threatening the f7 point, right? So we could do it immediately, yes, but it would be even more interesting to eliminate the d-pawn because that way it can no longer advance to block the bishop. And therefore, the correct option is to capture here and then develop the bishop to c4. Look at what an interesting thought process. In these videos, we learn a lot about reasoning, don't we? So that our games turn out better. Now, all pieces are developed, very well developed. We're going to castle, if we want, on the next move. We could even castle queenside to place the rook on the same file as the queen, and our position's attractive, while black's isn't so much, right? Especially because now they want to develop their knight to castle, and they can't do it with the common knight f6, because then they'd lose the e5 pawn, and there wouldn't be any sacrifices on e4 to recover it, because we could simply capture on f7, remember the weakest point of the position, making this fork, and practically winning the game immediately. Therefore, if they can't develop the knight through f6, they're going to do it through e7. This is of vital importance. I'll explain why in a minute, but first, let's focus on the missed opportunity that Steinitz had here. For those of you who already have a greater knowledge of the game of chess, you should try to find a winning combination for the white pieces right now. Steinitz played queen e2 here, which makes a lot of sense. He's preparing to castle queenside and place the rook on the same file as the queen. Does that make sense? You most likely need to watch this video several times, okay? That's my recommendation, if you have time, of course, because it has so many nuances that by watching it several times, they'll stick in your head. This move makes a lot of sense if it weren't for the fact that there was already a winning move here, and I'm going to tell you what it is next. Bishop takes f7, a brutal bishop sacrifice, attracting the king to the f7 square. In other words, an attraction sacrifice. And once the king captures on f7, the game would continue as follows. Knight g5, check, and when the king moves away, queen b3. And this position would be completely won for white. Steinitz didn't see this. Look at what it threatens. It threatens queen f7, check, and winning the bishop. It threatens knight e6, attacking the queen and attacking this point here too, the bishop. It even threatens knight f7, attacking the queen and attacking the rook at the same time. There are so many threats that it would be impossible for black to defend them all at once, right? However, what happened? Steinitz didn't see this combination. The combination of bishop takes f7, attraction sacrifice, and as I said, he played queen e2. Pay attention. If even the world champion misses these combinations, it's completely human for us to miss them too. That's why we're going to work on maximizing our good moves and minimizing our mistakes, right? We have to work on it little by little. Queen e2 is a correct move, and the game continues with short castling. Very well, key moment of the game. When you see a castling with a fianchetto, pay attention to this, okay? If you're doing two things at once, pay attention for just a minute, then you can go on with your life, okay? If you see a short or long castling, I don't care which, with a fianchetto, you must pay attention to whether they have the guard dog or the alarm set. Chess teacher, what are you talking about now? What nonsense are you telling me? Well, the guard dog, the alarm, the defender, call it what you want, is the knight on f6. It's of vital importance that they have the knight on f6. In this case, they don't have it. They have it on e7. But chess teacher, look, the position can't change that much. It can't be that they're lost. No, I'm not saying they're lost. I'm saying that now the game's going to get very complicated for them simply because they don't have a knight on f6. Sometimes the knight has developed through e7, sometimes the knight is on f6, and we manage to kick it out, and we're in the same situation. Sometimes we've even managed to eliminate this knight through some exchanges, right? The important thing is to understand that this knight is not on f6. Then the alarm should go off and you should go for this plan as Steinitz's. What did Steinitz say? Do you remember? The king isn't attacked just because, but what we have to do first is destroy his position. And at this moment, since the knight isn't defending, we must go with the h-pawn. And this has to stay engraved in your head. And this position is already very, very delicate for the black pieces. Let's see how it continues. The knight on f6 would be defending the two key squares, h5 and g4, right? Preventing these types of breakthroughs because you could simply capture with the knight. With the knight on e7, the breakthrough on e5 is too dangerous. Once we play h5, they won't be able to capture because then the file is opening up for the rook, the queen would come, the knight would jump in, and we'd give mate. So they should try to avoid this advance, right? The shame is that they can't stop it either, which I'm sure many of you are thinking, you play h5 and that's it. Here, it simply breaks with g4, and the position is completely lost. No matter how much the pawn is given away, the knight moves to h2. We're going to recapture here, and then we'll break at h5, just as we were planning a moment ago. Therefore, we conclude that this h4 is already completely lethal, and there's no way to stop it, to stop this h5, rather. Knight d7, watch out, they're heading for f6. It's actually a good idea, but they're already too late because we break at h5 immediately. Can they capture you? Obviously not. Capturing would be a mistake. In fact, we wouldn't even need to recapture with the rook. We could castle long, prepare well, and then, yes, capture, bring in the other rook, and this position would be a clear advantage for white. In fact, practically decisive. So what should they do? Well, as a last resort, they try to come and defend themselves, this time by placing the knight on f6. You know, right? When you play a fianchetto, also be very careful and always place the knight on f6 before it's too late. At this point, it's already too late. All right, we have to make a new decision. What do we do now? Do we take? Do we advance on g to kick out the knight? Do we take this pawn? Do we advance to delay the bishop's option? Well, basically, what we want is the following. Taking the pawn would of course be fine because we'd centralize the knight and threaten f7, but the best thing we have is to open the file for the rook, that is, capture on g. This is of vital importance. We want to open the file for the rook because once it's open, the attack on the h7 square is going to be lethal and unstoppable. And along with our knight, and sometimes along with our queen, when this knight is gone, right? See how important the f6 knight is? It'll already be completely decisive, right? So let's see now how black can continue it. They could capture with the h-pawn, which is what we normally want. Remember that the h and a pawns are the worst pawns in the entire position because they can only recapture inward and can't recapture outward. That's why it's said that all pawns are worth 1 point except these side ones, which are worth 0.7. So normally, recapturing toward the center is turning a 0.7 pawn into a 1-point pawn. But opening the entire file for the rook would be so dangerous that right now it wouldn't be the best idea at all. So they'd like to capture with the f-pawn, but look at what our tremendous bishop on c4 is doing. Do you understand now how important it was to exchange at the d5 square? That's why I'm telling you, this video is worth saving and watching more than once to try to understand it more and more. You see it, right? This bishop on c4 is now pinning the f7 square. They can't capture with h, they can't capture with f, they must sadly capture with the knight. And even though it seems like they have a good defensive source for the castle position with two knights and a bishop, right? We've destroyed their pawns, and they just have two isolated pawns left that are going to be way too weak and way too easy to attack. And I'm going to show you how Steinitz did it. At this point, it's true that one could launch an attack, but let's analyze a very interesting concept in the world of chess. Where do we want a castle? On the king side or the queen side? Obviously, queen side, because if we castle king side now, look at what's happening. We no longer have the file for our rooks. In fact, we'd have to move the king back, and that would just be silly. Better to castle queen side to move our rooks over to this flank, right? But of course, what's better for me, attacking directly or castling first? It's a question we can ask ourselves, right? Well, what you have to evaluate when you castle on opposite sides, meaning one castles king side and the other queen side, is who will reach the attack first. In this case, it's obvious that we're going to get there first. We have everything ready to attack as soon as we jump in with the knight, for example, right? While our opponent is still a massive distance away from creating an attack, in a game with opposite side castling, sorry for hitting the table, in an opposite flank game, the player who manages to launch their attack first is usually the one who emerges victorious. Therefore, Steinitz castles queenside and knows he'll be the first to attack. So first I castle, then I attack. And I also have this rook ready to enter the H file to cause some mischief, right? Black tries to counterattack on the queen side, which is what they should do. But of course, they're already too late. A move like h6 to try to stop the knight jump is simply punished with bishop takes. So there's no point doing anything on the king side. They must counterattack on the queen side. And now, the knight jump is already putting pressure on the h7 square and on the f7 square. You're going to see what an important finish we have here at the end. Could the knight be kicked out now with h6? Well, no, it wouldn't be a good move, because simply a move like knight takes f7 or even bishop takes f7 would give white the win almost immediately, because after the exchanges king takes, we could simply continue, I'm just brainstorming here, okay? Improving our position with knight c4, trying to penetrate through the d5 square, then entering with the queen, and this would be, you can check for yourselves, a huge and decisive advantage for white. That's why h6 is not a good move. So black has to settle for trying to attack on the king side, on their queen side, white's king. But as you can see, it's a very slow attack. Careful, very slow, but now they are indeed threatening to start blocking us. Therefore, we must be concise. And this is where white finally makes their big move. And the big move is as follows. I want to blow up the h7 square, and I want to eliminate the f6 square, because it's the best defender of the castle position, right? This watchdog, this defense, and look how they do it with this wonderful combination. Knight takes a6. We force black to capture the knight, because if not, we either capture it or take the rook, and with an extra pawn too. And now, a rook sacrifice for the knight. It's true, we're losing material, but now it's recovered with this queen h5. Look at what a wonderful combination, huh? Try to understand it, rewind the video if you didn't get it, it's absolutely fine. That's the good thing about these videos. You can watch them as many times as you need. This knight will be recovered, because when the king moves, if we want to, we can capture it. Remember that this pawn doesn't defend because it's pinned. See? Sorry, this bishop is here. It doesn't defend because it's totally pinned, right? Therefore, if we want, we can already capture this knight. We're down a rook, huh? This is important, but when we capture this knight, we'll simply be down the exchange. Do we care about having more material? No, because in opposite side castling, it's not the one with more material who wins, but the one who attacks first. That's why, before taking a knight, look, intermediate rook h1, bringing in another heavy piece against the threat on the h7 point. For those of you in the academy, you know Flavia's explained several times in various classes how to attack the opponent's castle position, whether with a fianchetto, without one, with the king here or the king there. Those of you in the academy already know this. If not, no problem. You can join. I'll leave the link in the description. And if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back, of course. Pay attention, okay? Right now, mate is threatened on h7. How can they defend it? Well, there's only one way, because no piece can come to defend h7. They can only play rook e8 to try to escape with the king. See? So rook e8 is the only move that keeps black alive. And now what? Well, now it's time to, yes, finally recapture this knight. Not just because you win a knight, but because you remove a defender and also threaten the inner here and also threaten the inner here, given mate on f7. We're about to deliver checkmate on the next move. Black has to defend it, and they do so with queen f6. Question, would it be a good idea to trade queens? Absolute mistake. When they propose a queen trade, which Flavia also explains. Flavia, for those who don't know, is a certified teacher. She's a FIDE master at the academy, an excellent teacher who uploads videos every week. She gave a class which is saved in the academy to evaluate when piece trades favor us and when they don't. It's a fabulous 45-minute class. Right now, in case you haven't seen the class, I'll give you a very quick summary. It's not in our interest to trade queens. Why? Because we have an attacking advantage, so it doesn't suit us, and a material disadvantage, so it doesn't suit us either, okay? That's why we must avoid the queen trade. However, here, white already has a winning combination to end the game, okay? Come on, do you want to do this last exercise? And those who want to practice, pause the video to try and find it. I'm going to give you the answer right now, okay? In case you haven't paused the video, the definitive answer here is the wonderful move bishop takes f7. And don't worry, I'm going to explain perfectly why this move is a winner. In the game, the logical queen takes bishop happen, winning the piece. This is what happened in the game, all right? Let's see how it continues. But first, what if after this check you do the other option, moving the king? Simply put, here the white pieces would take this rook, okay? Watch out, because now we have an extra knight, right? We have an extra knight. If they trade queens, we have an extra piece, again with a decisive advantage. Therefore, no, now they're the ones who shouldn't trade queens. And if they take here, the move rook h8 is lethal, forcing the black pieces to either move away, then they'd lose the rook and obviously resign, see? Or they'd capture here and then bishop h6 would be lethal. You can't block here because I'll take your queen and it's pinned. You can't come this way because then I'll take your queen, right? So rook 8 would already be completely lethal. But what happens? That in this precise position, huh? For those of you who got woes, simply what happened was bishop takes f7. You remember, right? Black realizes they can't move the king and they take the bishop, which is what happened in the game. But now here, the final exercise, the definitive move to win the game, is the following. Rook h8 wins the game. You can't take with the bishop because it's pinned. You can't move the king here or here. Therefore, you must accept this gift of a rook. And, as you can see, we draw the king out and deflect it from defending the queen. And after this capture, the black piece is resigned. Did you understand the concept of his game? Quite a lesson, right? Spectacular. Save this video to watch it as many times as you need. If you want to study with my classes, with Flavia's classes, and with Chess Mind Fully Unlocked, which is the best app for studying chess, I recommend you join the Academy. I recommend it 100%. Look at one thing. Of everyone who joins monthly, approximately 80% switch to a quarterly or annual plan. That means once they're in, they realize the huge value and how fun it is to study at the Academy, that they even upgrade their status. So I'm going to leave it for you down here in the description. If you're not convinced, I'll give you your money back, so you have nothing to lose by trying it. I recommend it 100%. Plus, right now we have the launch price, right? And from there, you guys do whatever you want, okay? I hope you love this video as much as I love recording and explaining it. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you tomorrow, as always, friends, in the next video. Bye.